Hello and welcome to the Mindful Millionaire YouTube channel. I'm Lisa Peterson. Today I'm interviewing Henry DeVries. Henry is a publisher, an indie book publisher. He is fascinating to learn about the way that he thinks about publishing books, about what he's learned from the authors that he's worked with for many years. We talk about the pros and cons of publishing your book through an independent publisher versus a traditional publisher, which is what I did with the Mindful Millionaire book. And I love my publisher, St. Martin's Press, but it isn't for everyone. Not everyone has the opportunity to traditionally publish. And I loved getting his perspective and the things that he's learned along the way. Enjoy. Henry, thanks so much for being here.
It's so great to be here. Thanks for the invitation. My favorite subject is helping people write books, publish books, promote books, so that people can be helped by their work.
That's wonderful. And I'm really pleased that we get to dive into book creation, writing books, the process behind the scenes that goes on to pulling it together, because I know you're an expert on that. And you've really helped me as I've processed through, like, what's next? How can I use my book to build a bigger platform? I don't know all the answers, but I know that coming to you, you are filled with experience. You've helped many people with the idea, from the ideation to all the way to the publishing of the book, which is just amazing. So I'm excited to get into that today. I'd love it if you could share a little bit about your inspiration for the work that you do.
Thanks for asking. So my motto is publishing the book is the starting line, the finish line. So the writing is important, the publishing is important, but what happens next? How is this book going to impact and influence lives? And that's what I train authors on. Our conversations have been about that. You certainly are a very impactful, influential person. How can you help more people? And that's what it's all about.
Beautiful. So you, this time it was you being unstable. So we didn't see you talking. Maybe we could just do that one answer. I can transition to you starting again. Okay.
Not sure I'll give the same answer, but go ahead, ask a question and I'll give an answer.
Okay. What inspires you?
What inspires me is helping people get their ideas into print so it can have impact and influence on others. It's all about not fame and fortune and ego. It's about helping other people improve their lives. And that inspires me.
Beautiful. When did you originally, I'm curious, when all of this started, before your publishing company, I know that you've been a writer for a really long time, but there's a big difference between writing for publications and then making that transition to writing a book. And I'll say from my side, I feel like I started blogging and then realized how much I liked blogging, which caused me to start to get interested in writing a book. But I'm curious about you.
I wrote my first book in the 1990s, Self-Marketing Secrets, and was published by a traditional publisher. And then they wanted my next book. And I thought, I don't want to do my next book. It was a lot of work to do the first book and to promote it. And then some years went by and I decided to start a firm to help people to do the self-marketing and get their brand out there. And one of the things I had always advised people on was writing a book. And somebody came to me and said, you say write a book. I don't know how to write a book. Would you help me write a book? And I helped them write a book. It was the person I hired went to 10,000 copies in the marketplace right away. I recently got an unsolicited testimonial that book helped them make an extra $1 million in the last decade. They led me to other people. People kept finding me. Could you help me ghostwrite the book? After 50 of those books, I quit my job at the University of California as the assistant dean for continuing education, because I told them I love our work, but I love these business leaders and consultants and agency owners more. And it's frustrating for them to get the book published and then to get people to pay attention to their book. So 9 years ago, I dedicated the rest of my life to that pursuit. And that's what we've been doing. And now I have over 150 people I've helped publish and promote their books and have more impact and influence in the world.
Why do you think it is so magical to help a business person go to the lengths that they have to go to publish a book? Like, how do you think it changes someone's life?
Yeah, I guess you could say, well, anybody could do a book. Well, if anybody could do a book, and a lot have, but probably that's 10% of the population. So taking the steps, doing that, one, gives you more credibility. Two, people will be impacted, and more people will be impacted by hearing you talk about the book than actually reading the book. That's like a dirty little secret I have to share. The third thing is, and people come back to me and they said, why didn't you tell me writing the book and publishing the book is going to make me better at what I do? I said, well, you wouldn't have believed me at the start, but everybody comes back because you had to organize and clarify your thinking to be able to explain it to others. And, you know, a teacher learns more than the students. So you learned a lot more so you could explain this to people, and it's helped you in your work.
I totally hear every one of those things that you mentioned, particularly the idea that you become so much better at what you're doing. Because when you have to take the time to explain it in that level of detail and make the assumption, right, that someone's going to be able to use your words rather than you being in physical presence with them, that they're going to be able to get the benefits, it takes a lot to be able to do that. And I'm curious from your side, why are some books really transformational in many people's lives, and then others that the author was intending to be transformational, but it kind of fell flat and it didn't actually make a difference? Have you noticed something different in those in books?
Very much so. And if I leave you with one piece of science today, it's this: human brains are hardwired for stories. The other message I teach my authors is your stories matter. This isn't just about stories you've gathered and plucked. It's how have you helped people go from mess to success? So if I may, I'll tell a story. The year's 2015, the place, Memphis, Tennessee. We're in an 800 square foot apartment with Penny Reed. And Penny Reed is at her kitchen table and she has a stack of unpaid bills. Penny has no idea how she's going to pay these bills. I hope you get to meet Penny one day because she's a special person. This stack of bills and this apartment was a far cry from the 4,000 square foot home she used to live in with her former husband, who was also her employer, who gave her all her client work. Penny said, well, if you're going to dream, dream big. In 2 years, I'm going to make $200,000 a year as a speaker and an author. And that's when she met me. I said, Penny, what do you know how to do better than anyone? She goes, oh, I got this. I know how to give dentists cash flow and time to enjoy life. But let me tell you, dentists are screwed up people. They borrow money to go to college. Then they borrow money to go to graduate school. And then they borrow more money to open a practice. And they think they own a business. A business owns them. They're the indentured servant of that business until they can pay off all that debt or find somebody to take it off their hands. But I know how to give them cash flow and time to enjoy life. I said, bingo, we got a business model here. She said, so the plan is we're going to write this book with a provocative title, and then I'm going to go speak. And then after speaking, people will find me and they'll hire me. I said, oh, no, that's not the plan at all. And she says, it's not. I said, oh, no. I said, the plan is, she said, well, first, what's the provocative title? I said, oh, I have it. You're ready? She said, yeah. I said, it's growing your dental business. It's what they want and it's what you know how to do. She says, well, what's my first step? I said, first step is I want you to make one phone call a day. One a day, like a vitamin, one a day. She says, who am I going to call? I said, you're going to call people who book speakers to talk to dentists and dentists who might hire somebody to improve their practice. And she says, oh, I'm going to run out of people to talk to in a week. I said, no, you're not. There's a million of them and they're multiplying like rabbits. So Penny started making a phone call a day, and she would call these people and talk to them about her upcoming book. And they started hiring her to speak, and some dentists started hiring her like, well, I can't wait for that book to come out. I need you to come help me do this. We get the book done in 4 months and then we publish it. And she says, do I quit making the phone calls? I said, oh, no, you got to keep making the phone calls. And then you got to do one more thing. So what's that? I said, you've got to mail a copy of the book every day to someone. We're not going to wait for you to be discovered. We're going to put it in people's hands. She said, who am I going to send the books to? Ready, everyone? People who book speakers to talk to dentists and dentists who might hire a consultant. So she's sending out a book a day, 20 a month to these people. I'm going to fast forward to the end of the story. It's 2 years later. She's at her computer. She hits the print button on her QuickBooks profit and loss statement. Comes out of the computer. She looks at it and it says gross profit, $200,000, $100,000 from speaking, $100,000 from consulting. That took 2 years to go from debt to $200,000 a year. Now, Penny lets me tell that story and use her name with 2 caveats. The first is, she said, don't make my ex-husband the villain of this story. He's not the villain of the story. We just didn't want to be married anymore. You know, I wish him well. I said, what's the second caveat? Oh, you need to tell him it's up to $280,000 a year. Now, we're not just about the money. The money is about the impact you have. It's a score in our world that if you're helping people, a byproduct is you get paid for it. It's not about the book sales. It's about talking about the book that's going to impact people's lives. And that can be through your Audible version of your book. It could be on podcasts like this. Thank you very much. And it could be on your own podcast, though I advise people to make it a TV show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. I love that story. And it's so interesting just to think about, because I'm totally getting the fact that the number of people who have heard me be interviewed on podcasts or radio shows or TV programs is in the millions, but I haven't sold 1 million copies of the book. And so I don't know that I ever thought of it that way, that that's actually the impact. And by having the book, you get those invitations. People come to me, PR companies, and they're like, oh, we'll help you, you can pay us. And I'm like, great, but I get so many opportunities. I'm choosing which ones I want to be a part of. It's not me even having to go out and seek them out, although I could. It's just really easy. If I ask somebody, typically they're going to look online and they're going to be like, oh my gosh, we need to have this gal. She's been on so many other shows. Oh. The podcast opportunities are incredible, and they do lead to book sales, and they lead to people reaching out and trying to find out, like, well, how can I get access to you and to your consulting? So totally.
I get clients from appearing on podcasts, and when they come, the cycle is much shorter because, I've heard all about this. I've got this. Just like, how would this apply to me? answer some questions, and we'll have a meaningful conversation. And I'll say, I don't expect, as a matter of fact, I don't want a decision today. Let me send it to you in writing, and then, review it, and then have a conversation with me to ask questions. But it's sometimes what used to take months takes less than a week when you have a platform to talk about through these podcasts.
Mm-hmm. And the transformational aspects, I want to go back to that because I'm
Okay.
really curious. Like, stories change everything. So if you have a book filled with stories, there's a higher chance that someone is going to actually get involved, do the work, change their lives. But if it doesn't have stories, or it doesn't have good stories or relevant stories, then maybe it won't have the impact.
Yeah, we don't need another book that's a lecture. We don't need a textbook. Human brains are hardwired for stories, in that's how we retain and process information. So long after this podcast, I could give, and if you want, I'll give you the 9 ways to write a book. But people are going to remember Penny Reed, and how Penny Reed went from a kitchen table in a little apartment to being a big success. Oh, and by the way, she found love, family, a lot of things transformed also. Not time to tell all that in the story. But people know that these things happen. And she's
Mm-hmm.
happy because of the people she's helping.
Mm-hmm. One question on this stories that comes to mind, that I think is important, and I have my own thoughts about it because of writing The Mindful Millionaire, but is there a balance between stories that are just like all about you as the author, and then the number of stories that you have about other people and the things that are happening for other people? And because one can be, if it's just all about you, it's more like a memoir, and that serves its purpose. But many people in a business setting aren't writing memoirs. They're writing books that will lead and transform into their business and the success that they're wanting to create. What are your thoughts?
If they work with me as their developmental editor, I'm going to say, I want at least a dozen stories in this book. Only one gets to be your story, your defining story. Because as people read this, the stories give evidence that you know how to take people from A to B, from problem to solution. You're not the hero of the stories. That's a lot of pushback I get. Well, we did heroic things. We really helped this person. I said, yeah. If you're telling the story that way, you're making the prospect the damsel in distress, and you're the knight in shining armor that rescued them. People don't identify with being the damsel in distress. You need to make them the hero of the story, who had a problem, had the wisdom to seek out the voice of experience. That's you. You're like the wizard. You're like Yoda in the story. And then they listen to you. This is Penny Reed. Penny Reed's the hero of that story. She gets at the end. I'm the mentor character who gave her pushback and showed her a path and a plan to do this. That's your job in the story. You're the knowledge, expertise, relationship person in the story. It comes in the middle. The hero, the Penny Reed, succeeds because they listened to you and they did the hard work to apply that knowledge. It's one thing to read about it. You can read The Mindful Millionaire. If you don't take action, nothing is going to change in your life. So you're a mentor in a lot of people's lives. They're the hero in the journeys. They've got to make that journey. They've got to bring the mindfulness in. It's not just theory. So that's why we tell stories. And if you want, I can get into more detail. There are 8 great stories that human brains are hardwired for. And this goes back to Freud and Jung. And there's a lot of evidence on why we as humans want these stories and need these stories.
Mm-hmm. And for me, it was difficult to learn how to actually write the story. So I understand about getting help with this. I'm guessing a lot of people, business people, are not, I mean, maybe you have a special talent, but many of us don't have that one of learning and knowing how to write stories so that they hit the mark, that they're meaningful and compelling, and they really show and evidence what's happening for somebody. But is that something that you actually end up
Yeah.
helping
So I
people with?
wrote the book Persuade with a Story, and I'm a professional speaker who is invited by CEOs around the country to come in and train them. And my system, I make it really simple. I said, this is going to be a 2-minute story, and it's going to have 3 characters. There's the hero, there's the Luke Skywalker. That's the prospect or person you helped. There is the nemesis villain character, the Darth Vader. It doesn't have to be a person, it could be something. In Penny's story, it was getting divorced and starting with 0. As a matter of fact, starting less than 0, starting negative. And then there's the mentor character. That's me. That's when I met Penny Reed, and we had this pushback discussion, and it's hard, but she does it, and she gets success at the end. So I just tell people to tell those stories with 3 characters. If you're trying to influence employees, you tell an employee story where the employee is the hero. Some situation is the nemesis villain, and you should be the mentor character in the story. So if it's an investor in your company, you tell an investor story who you helped go from mess to success. So that's the simple formula.
I love it. It was really funny. I'm not sure. I know you're listening to The Mindful Millionaire, but there was a time when I had this idea that was super pivotal to the ideas I was putting together for the book. And I was like, I can't, my writing skill is not good enough to come up with, like, I'm not a fiction writer, but I knew that I didn't have an external story to show this point. And it was driving me nuts for like a month. And we were getting in the car to go on a trip out of town. My husband and I do a lot of road trips. And we got in the car, and the minute I shut the door, I was like, oh, honey, I want to tell you about this crazy dream that I had last night. And the minute I started to tell him about the dream, I started crying because I was like, oh my gosh, this is the story. This is how I'm going to explain it. And so I'm like, don't talk to me, and I got out my pen and paper, because when you're writing a book, pen and paper goes with you everywhere, to the grocery store, what have you. And I just started writing the story. And interesting enough, I was the person, the Luke Skywalker. The nemesis were these like timeshare people, and the journey was, this realization of, you've got to feel enough, in your own self. But it was such a hard concept to explain that I needed a dream to actually show me how to explain this. But it was really fun. And
The Wizard of Oz, the wonderful Wizard of Oz, came to Frank Baum in a dream.
oh
The dream
my gosh.
in that story. And also I can relate to the writing down. Before I formed my company, Indie Books International, and I was working at the University of California, I took my teenage son on a drive from San Diego to Northern California, and all of a sudden on the drive, I said, Jordan, write this down. And I'm dictating things to him to write down these notes. And then I pulled off in a rest area, and I had this brown paper grocery bag, and I ripped it to make this long piece of grocery paper. And I took a pen, and then I wrote out and pictures and all this, and it was the vision for the business that I've created today. And Jordan just looked at that and said, you better save that, because that's probably going on a frame on a wall one day. And I have it in the file, and I'm thinking, I probably should frame that and put, but at the time it was like, I felt like, the mad scientist at the university. They laughed at me at the university, but I'll show those fools, I'll show them all. This business I've created.
when I started doing the promotion on some of the bigger podcasts before the book came out, one of my friends, Stacking Benjamin, Joe Salci, he's like in the podcast, he had read the book and he's like, "You, my friend, have the strangest, most thorough dreams of anyone I know, you know?" And I was like, "Oh, I know exactly where you're going with this
Yeah.
next question." You know, it was really fun because, again, people remember the stories, and he knew that it had come in a dream, that it really did have an effective, you know, kind of visual component to it of like, you could see yourself in my shoes and you
Yeah.
could be like, could have been there. And how weird that it took something like that to show what I was trying to get across, but it did it. Yay.
Yay. Well,
Yeah.
so 8 great stories. I'm in LA. The year's 2014. I'm in a penthouse meeting room, meeting with a bunch of CEOs. The host is an attorney. Let's call him Bernie the attorney. And after the presentation, he invites me back into his private office, and it's filled with movie memorabilia and props. And he said, let me explain. My grandfather was a famous Hollywood producer in the 20s and 30s, and my father was a famous Hollywood producer in the 40s and 50s. I chose entertainment law, but you solved a mystery for me today. I said, "A mystery, Bernie? What's that?" And he said, "Grandpa used to always say, well, we only make 8 movies in Hollywood." And I didn't understand what he meant until your presentation today. So there are 8 great stories human brains are hardwired for. Your book is a rebirth story. And I'm reading it, it's just so clear. And that's the comeback, the redemption, certainly a trial by fire, literally, that you come out of. Now, what are the others? There's the monster problem story. There's the underdog rags to riches story. There's a comedy wacky solution to a problem, and then there's a tragic shortcut solution to a problem. There's the mystery. There's the quest for a great prize or insight. Those are journey books. There's the escape from Crazy Town books. That's Wizard of Oz, I mentioned, is Dorothy Gale from Kansas, ma'am, escaping from Crazy Town. And then there's the redemption, rebirth, Phoenix Rising story. Those are the 8. So it also helps to know what story you're telling, because, and why Grandpa said we only make those 8 movies in Hollywood. The story to avoid is the Grandpa story. Well, we were taking the hogs to Cumminsville up to the fair, and we stopped for blueberry pie. Not as good as the apple pie your Aunt Madge used to make. You know, Madge's husband was a drunk. He'd get in a fight every Saturday night at the Moose. I said, like, where is this story going? That's the Grandpa story. And somebody was like, oh, he's like, we don't have time to sort or listen to it. But if you say, I'm going to tell you an underdog story. This is a David versus Goliath story. Oh, the Penny Reed is a rebirth story. Former life, it's very, 4,000 square foot home and business and all that. Now she's poor, doesn't know how to pay her bills. She ends where she's making $280,000 a year and is happy for it. Okay, people can relate to those stories. People need those stories. We need to read your book. Even if we don't practice what you say, it helps me get through life knowing, people have had it rougher than I've had it, and they've bounced back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's so interesting because they do also overlap. Like you might have a couple of those, but what you're saying is there's always this overarching theme, and then inside of it there
Yeah.
might be some aspects. But what you're bringing back to me is one of my challenges with the work that I do is that it was never about the money, like the money, the dollars and cents. Like I've always been good with money. And by the time I even started the work that I do today, I'd already become a millionaire and was, in a good place with money. But it was the rebirth the difference between the Mindful Millionaire and probably most other money books is, instead of it being focused on, I'm going to go show you how you can have more money, the challenge in writing it was, I'm going to show you how you can have a better life with or without money. Like, it's not about the money, it's about what's happening inside of you. What is that relationship that you have with scarcity or abundance? And what decisions do you make? And it was hard because I was constantly questioning the assumptions of what everyone else says, and like staying on track with that theme was just sheer passion on my part, because a lot of times, especially with money, you're like, oh, well, it's got to all be about the money. That's why people are going to buy the book. They want more money. And making sure that a reader doesn't come into your book and feel tricked. Like, I came in wanting more money, but now I see it's about something else. You can't change everyone, in that regard. Some people will feel that way, but it was interesting because it was just a complicated thing that I wanted to accomplish in writing the book. Do you feel like people often, one of the reasons a book becomes a bestseller is because you are questioning the assumptions of what everyone else is saying?
Well, there's 4 types of books. Some books have new information on a subject. There's no new information about money. It goes back thousands of years, same principles. Then there's more information about money. That's when you write this, and Tony Robbins, I like his book, but it's this thick.
Yeah.
It's like more information. And then there's better information where you say, well, I've looked at all these different systems and here's the best situation for money. And then there's different information where contrarian, or let's look at this a different way, or you've been it's not your fault, but you've been believing myths. Yours is that 4th category, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
People have been buying into these myths about money and about that money is the root of all evil. No, the scriptures say the love of money is the root of all evil. And those people who seek only silver are not going to be happy with just silver. So there's all kinds of ancient wisdom around this. But it's hiding in plain sight. You showed what was hiding in plain sight about money. Well, that helps. But to be a bestseller is a process, and it's work. And I often educate people that books don't promote authors. Authors promote books. Now they get the reflection of the book, the reflection of that spotlight that's on the book. And if you have a book that's very helpful and you don't wait to be discovered, and you realize that promoting the book is a marathon and we don't run it at a sprint pace, but we keep getting a spotlight on that book and for many years, then that's what helps it become a bestseller.
Mm-hmm. Ryan Holiday talks about the perennial seller. Can you tell us what you think about that?
Well, that's the holy grail. So at the average Barnes & Noble, there are 200,000 titles. The last I checked, Amazon.com were selling 32 million titles. So who gets into the bookstore? Even a bestseller like mine, which is an international bestseller, now in Chinese, it's only in bookstores for a while, unless it is evergreen. It's perennial. So what color is your parachute? About careers. What to expect when you're expecting, about pregnancy. A Cat in the Hat, teaching toddlers how to read. There's just a new audience for those books every year, and those are what bookstores stock. So while that's a great objective to be one of those books, you don't have to do that to be a success at this.
I love it. Because like you said, and Penny's story is really helpful, there are processes that you can follow and have proven themselves over and over again. When you follow those steps and you're targeting the right message to the right people, then it's not rocket science. Like, you can do this, is I think
Yeah.
what I'm hearing you say. Yeah.
As Britney Spears says, it's not rocket surgery. Okay.
Rocket surgery.
Sorry, Brittany. Okay. Where
The
else can we go?
best suggestions for people who want to make money.
Okay. So my point of view is, and I wrote the book Marketing with a Book, not marketing a book. Marketing with a book is about what happens as the result of a book. And there's the magnificent 7 things an author can do. 1, they can put on their own small scale seminars, Q&As on Zoom on a regular basis. 2, they can get invited to be on other people's stages. And I include podcasts as stages today. Being on a podcast is a gift that keeps giving. Number 3, they can get published. And that's not just a book, that's a spectrum. It starts with, I do a weekly LinkedIn newsletter. Okay, I also am paid to write 5 columns a month for Forbes.com. That's on the spectrum. I've written 20 books and had 20 books published. That's on the spectrum. Do I have a New York Times bestseller yet? Nope. Because on my book on Warren Buffett, I figured out it would cost me $100,000, an investment of $100,000 to get that to be a New York Times bestseller. But for $20,000, I could make it an Amazon.com #1 bestseller in 4 different categories, not for a day or a night or a screenshot capture, but for 100 days on the business bestseller list, now in 5 languages, including Chinese, for my running gag. So all those things. Oh, and by the way, who sells more books, Amazon.com or the handful of bookstores the New York Times does to monitor sales? So yeah, so a lot more sales on Amazon. So those are choices you make as an author, but it's a business. This is the book business. And the book, though, is not how you make the money. I've measured that the true way to make money is as a result of the book: consulting, training, paid speaking, and I've found the ROI that we have measured over 20 years is 4x to 20x. So a 400 to 2,000% ROI. I don't know any other investment. I ghostwrite, I help publish a lot of financial books, and I'm not seeing those kind of returns in other places. But you can see it with a book if you do it the right way.
Mm-hmm. Being published by a publisher versus self-publishing or hybrid publishing.
Yeah.
Your take on that?
Well, you just used a 4-letter profanity, the S word, SELF. Nobody on this call or podcast, do not say you self-publish a book. There's a stigma with self-publishing that you're this crazy person with your manifesto and all that. So we either publish traditionally or independently. So, but to your point, traditional publishers like, the big New York publishers we all know, Simon and Schuster and Random House and Penguin and McGraw-Hill, that's where they take a manuscript. They believe that the author can sell 10,000 copies. This is non-celebrity authors, by the way. If you're Michelle Obama, this is a different game. But if you're Leisa or Henry, we're journey people on this journey. So we have to prove to them that we can sell 10,000 copies a year for them to publish our book. And by the way, they keep 85% of the profits and give us 15% when we can catch them. Okay. Independently or hybrid is a firm that, like an indie movie or an indie record label, you pay to have it produced, and then you keep the lion's share, the 85% of the profit that's going to make. I have many authors who've been published both ways, where they're published with a big New York publisher, and then they're published with Indie Books, my company. And he said, Henry, I have to tell you in confidence. I said, what? He goes, I make more money off your book than I do from my traditional published book. I said, I know, so do I. My books, when I'm keeping 85% versus getting 15%, and if I can sell 10,000 books, I think I'd rather have that $85,000 instead of giving that $85,000 away. So that's sort of what's happening with that. But we say, well, you got to take a risk. What about the help from the publisher? I don't know about you, but I didn't get any help from mine. It was sort of like thrown into the pool, sink or swim. They're very good at, when somebody's selling well, then they'll throw some money or help toward it. But unless you can really go out there and market your book, that's another dirty little secret of publishing. The author does the bulk of the promotion of the book. So obviously, because I started an indie publishing firm and I've helped 150 people with this, I have a preference. But I still have been published several times by traditional publishers. I love to tell people about my McGraw-Hill book. It just has a cachet, and it's an international bestseller, and oh, that's good for my brand. It's not good for my bottom line, really. My book, and we talked about being read. One of my Forbes.com columns was read by more people than if you add up the sales of my 20 books. This is what we have to realize. One interview I've had, like, more people heard about the book than read all my books. Mm-hmm. But so am I a failure? No, I'm trying to teach people I'm different, like you're different. I'm telling you, there's some different information here about how it's better for you to use a hybrid independent publisher, keep the lion's share of the money, and also the control. That's the thing. When you sign a contract with a traditional publishing firm, you relinquish all control for any version of that book. If I do a software program about how to close a deal like Warren Buffett, I have to pay 50% of the royalties to McGraw-Hill. Mm-hmm. If I invented a board game, anything, they sign you up on that. I rather keep 100% of control. One more point. Ken Blanchard, who is a mentor of mine and did the 1 Minute Manager, and he's probably the most successful living business book author, probably over 20 million sales and Amazon Hall of Fame type of person. He really taught me it's really what happens as the result of the book. And mm-hmm. 1 Minute Manager, he independently published that. He sold 40,000 copies. And then Morrow came along and he wrote the contract, and Morrow blasted it out. They can take a bestseller and blast it out, and it sold 12 million. So he got a smaller piece of the pie, but it was a much bigger pie in that situation. So same thing, Chicken Soup for the Soul did the same thing, proved it could sell independently. And then Mark Victor Hansen and Jack Canfield got $1 million advance for a series of books. I think they have over 200 versions of that book right now. So those are what can happen, but you can still start independent because you control the intellectual property forever.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And I think with the business books in particular, like you said, there can be all these spin-offs and all these different things that come out of it. So if you retain the rights to the book, it's very favorable for you in what might happen with that business.
Sure. Well, and remember, if you write a fiction book, just on this side of the business, and they own half of everything, when you get the movie deal, guess who got half the money for the movie deal? Yeah. So yeah, I always say two people are not your friends: banks and book publishers. Because when you need them, they're not interested in you. When you don't need them, they're very interested in you. Um, you know, well, a couple have wined and dined me. And I thought, like, why is this person taking me to an expensive restaurant, buying me an expensive lunch? Oh, it's not because they're my friend. They want me to sign a piece of paper that's going to
Right.
come my revenue stream.
I do want to, because my book was published by St. Martin's Press. I want to say that I have had a very exceptionally incredible experience with the publisher, and it has a much bigger reach as a result of publishing with them. I think that most of the time, though, when I talk to my friends who have done similar publishing deals, they've been very disappointed. And a lot of the things that you reference have shown up for them. But I just want to say, I love my publisher. I adore the support, and they helped me to write a better book, which, I think the pressure was on. They paid me a pretty big advance, and I really felt like I wanted to earn that, as best as I could. But again, I don't know too many people who have had the kind of experience that I've had. And so I just think that there's always two sides to
St. Martin's has a
experiences.
very good reputation. St. Martin's, I'm sorry to step on you there.
Yeah.
St. Martin's has a very good reputation. One of my authors, one of their books was with St. Martin's. They were very happy. And then, so yeah, but it's, as Damon Runyon said, the battle is not always to the strong nor the race to the swift, but that's the way to bet. So, so I encourage people to bet the indie route. But for some of my authors, I'll bring out, and I've brought them out with places like Stanford University Press, because I thought for their brand, it would be more important to say that they're published by Stanford University Press or Wiley, or one of our authors, graduated from us to Greenleaf, and another graduated from us to McGraw-Hill, and I'm all in favor of that for the branding, because it's really not about the advance. It's about what's going to happen as the result of the book. And if saying you're published with Stanford University Press helps the brand and your offer, then that would be a wise decision. So nothing's 100% on anything. And also sometimes being an indie publisher yourself, challenge with that is you're cobbling together a team on your own, and you need to make sure that the book has the same rigor that a book that's published by a good hybrid press or traditional press. One of my mottos is the world does not need another crappy business book. And I'm sad when people show me their crappy business book and ask me, Henry, what do you think about it? And I want to tell them, I think it looks like an Armani suit with some knee patches is what I think. But because they'll take shortcuts and they don't know, and it just has that, they don't spend the money on the editing. So it's, when you're reading it, you're going like, oh man, there's a lot of errors in this. And one person saved money, and because he typeset, he indie published and typeset it himself. And I don't know what he used, Microsoft Word or something. But he came out and said, what do you think of the book? And I said, oh, I think your book's adequate. He said, well, adequate, that's not what I want. And I said, well, why did you have your secretary lay it out and not hire an artist for $1,000 to make it look as professional as possible? Oh, yeah. So he had to take the book down, redo it. I call those Fahrenheit 451. One author showed me his book and said, what do you think? And on the cover, it said forward, spelled Forward, forward by person. I said, the word is forward, Foreword. And he goes, what do I do? I've printed 5,000 copies of that.
Oh, no.
I said, Fahrenheit 451. That's the Ray Bradbury book about the temperature books burn
Yeah.
at. So I said,
Yeah.
you need to burn those books. Don't even give them away to like Goodwill, because every person who sees that book, it hurts your brand.
Yeah.
Uh,
Totally.
and
Yeah.
you
There's so
cover a
much
horrible mistake.
opportunity.
It's not a
I
mistake
hear
on page
you.
58, like a lot of us, I hope whoever's listening, I hope your book will be the first perfect book ever published. The odds are against it. None of us have had a perfect book. Um, so you make sure you get as many gremlins out as possible, but you definitely don't have them on the cover or back cover of your book.
Yeah.
That's a kiss of death.
Totally. Well, I'm so happy that we've been able to have this conversation, Henry, and shed some light on publishing and so many things that I think people are taking away, storytelling and writing your book. What would people do if they want to learn more about you?
Thanks. Thank you for asking. They would go to my website, Indie, INDIE, books, BOOKSINTL.com. And there's free resources. There's also a way to contact me if you want to have a strategy call on a book. I'm happy to do it. If you're serious about a book and want a strategy call, there would be no cost for that. It's a non-selling zone. The only catch is I'm busy and you might have to wait for the appointment, but I'm happy to meet with people. That's part of the generosity, because I'd rather people spend a half an hour with me. There's a German proverb about, if you're on the wrong road, it doesn't matter how fast you're going. If you're writing the wrong book, actually going fast can be harmful, get you farther away from where you need to be. So I'm happy to have that call.
Awesome. Thank you so much. If you've enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe to the channel. That way you'll get all the latest updates of meditations, tapping videos, different coaching calls that I share on the YouTube channel. And also be sure to take my money and chakra quiz. This shows you where you might be out of balance as it pertains to money and exactly what you can do for your next steps.